Let's go over to Las Vegas. Niall McGrath was there. Good morning, sir. It's very early where you are.
Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, great. So, let's work in reverse. We'll get on to the fight in a moment. Talk to us from the moment that the fight was over and Khabib went over and said something to McGregor. What was your vantage point? What did you see?
I was in shock, Joe, when I saw it. I couldn't believe what was going on in front of my eyes. It took quite a moment for me to register what was going on, and then it was just a melee. So a few of us in the media had to piece back what actually went on, and then clips on Twitter started arising. So we pieced back what went on there. So it was very interesting and, absolutely disgusting. And I think the feeling amongst the media after we sort of saw what went on in the incident was utter disappointment and disgust, as I said. Just terrible incident. I didn't back Conor McGregor, obviously, when he did those horrific things in Brooklyn, and I'm not going to defend Khabib's actions now. It was absolutely appalling look for the sport.
Dana White, we played a clip from there saying he gave the old "I'm not even mad, I'm just disappointed" routine. Seemed, in so much as you can tell with these things, to be genuinely very upset with the situation. Is there anything comparable with this in UFC history? A lot of people might just watch McGregor fights in the main. We've seen him hop over a fence and call out Aldo. Nothing in comparison to what we saw last night. Has anything like this happened generally on a big night like this in the UFC?
There's been a Strike Force incident a number of years back with Nate Diaz. There was a melee in the cage. But in terms of the UFC, there was an incident a number of years ago between an English fighter called Paul Daly and Josh Koscheck, where after the fifth round and the fight was finished, Paul Daly proceeded to sucker punch Josh Koscheck, and that was a big fight at the time. And subsequently, Paul Daly never fought in the UFC again. So that's probably the most comparable incident in UFC history to what went on last night. Okay,
but it's rare is the short version.
Very, very rare, yes.
So Dana White's raised the possibility of Khabib being stripped of his title, owing largely to lengthy suspension and the possibility of visa issues going forward now. 3 members of Khabib's entourage arrested and then detained and ultimately released because McGregor's refused to press charges.
Yeah, that's what happened. 3 of the guys were released. One of them is believed to be Tugachev, who's meant to be fighting Artem Lobov in 2 weeks' time. Dana White said they will never fight in the UFC again, those 3 guys that were involved in that incident. One of them sucker punched Conor. There's actually new footage coming out the whole time on social media of different angles, and it did very much look the case. Obviously, Khabib didn't let go of the hold. I think he proceeded to spit on Conor as well. Then obviously went up over the cage, and when Conor was on top of the cage, a number of Khabib's guys came in when he got on the other side of the cage, back into the octagon, and he was sucker punched. So, totally unsavoury incident, and it's just, I think the major incident, major problem here for Khabib and his team are putting the fans, fans at jeopardy, and when you're going to these events, you need to be safe, and the fans weren't safe, and I think that could be a major issue going down the line. Yeah. If Conor's not going to press charges, so that's going to be interesting to see what happens there, Joe, as well.
Yeah. So Khabib said afterwards, he apologised, said it wasn't his best self that he put forward. Said,
to be honest, you
can't talk about religion, you can't talk about nation, you can't talk about my father like this. This was Khabib's point. And Daniel Cormier, who was praised by Dana White for trying to settle down Khabib, they're training partners, and he got in and tried to settle things down. He said, two wrongs don't make a right. Conor didn't deserve that, no one did, but some things aren't for fight promotion, religion, family, country, throwing stuff at a bus in Brooklyn. For Khabib, none of this was fight promotion. It was really personal, different culture, man, was what he tweeted. And I guess we saw that manifest itself in the way Khabib reacted it at the end of the fight.
100%, yeah. I've said all along, I felt there was a big, dark undertone to this fight all the way from back in Brooklyn, that incident. There was a lot of things unanswered in the build-up to this fight. Obviously, the incident with Khabib and Artem Lobov, which sparked this whole, dislike and beef about, that was the incident. So it's just very frustrating. Again, the sport's under the spotlight, and it's just been absolutely, it's just disgraceful carry on. But I'm not really sure what they can do from this, Joe. It's just a mess, and I'm very surprised at the UFC for giving Khabib a platform in the press conference after his actions. And I thought it was pretty bad from the UFC. And, Khabib didn't show any remorse in what he did. I know there was, a bit of trash talk, but that's fight promotion. I don't think the line was exactly crossed in the build-up of the press conferences over the last couple of weeks.
And was Tugachev He wasn't the bloke in the red top, was he, who hopped into the ring and caught McGregor from behind?
I haven't seen that yet, but my colleague from MMA Junkie and USA Today named him, and John is normally very accurate with these statements when he comes out with them.
Okay, but that's TBC for the moment.
Yeah.
The fight itself was Conor McGregor's worst nightmare.
Yeah. For me, ring rust is a real thing, and I think we saw it in there tonight. Very, very sloppy from the get-go. He started throwing kicks in the first round, very silly against a guy like Khabib. And I think we saw it in the second round. He got absolutely destroyed. The fight possibly could have been stopped in that second round. Very sloppy start to the second round again. And the interesting thing is, though, he did take the third round on the judges' scorecards. The first round in Khabib's career that he's lost, which is pretty incredible. Just not a good night for Conor. I think, as I said, the ring rust was a real thing. And lots of improvements going forward. I'm not so sure we're going to see a rematch anytime soon, as you said, with the Nevada State Athletic Commission looking, I would imagine, to give Khabib a lengthy ban. So there's plenty of other fights to make for Conor, but I don't think it's going to be Khabib for quite some time. Yeah, I mean, that third round was very interesting to watch because the glass jaw that McGregor may have been hoping for didn't appear. I mean, Khabib took some shots and was absolutely fine. And the other point as well, and not for the first time, McGregor looked gassed. He looked wrecked. Maybe it's ring rust, but I don't know. You look at his general lifestyle, I'm sure when he's in camp, he works his ass off and he's in phenomenal shape. But I mean, there's got to be some issue here. What is going on in his general life where he looks gassed in every fight lately? I think they both sort of did at certain points in the fight. Did you think so? Sorry, yeah. I mean, you know more than me. It looked to me like Khabib was in complete control. I thought Khabib looked a little bit tired, going into the third round. Okay. Conor, listen, he was all over Conor in that second round. That's an incredibly grueling position to be in for Conor McGregor, trying to escape from Khabib. And I think he did really, really well to survive that second round against a guy like Khabib. So, I thought he looked okay. Obviously there's work to be done there still. It's always been a problem for Conor. And yeah, maybe it is a case of his lifestyle catching up on him. But yeah, listen, it's something they can work on, for his comeback again, when I'm sure he's going to be back in there at least once more. Yeah, so obviously the scenes we've been talking about, the melee at the end, have overshadowed the fight. Where does the fight itself leave McGregor and his stock? On the one hand, I mean, it's breaking all these records and he's still the biggest star by a distance. On the other hand, he's lost here in fairly decisive fashion. Is he still in a position, because of marketability, to effectively choose his next fight? Or is Dana White going to sit down with him and say, Conor, you're going to have to do one or two fights for me here to try and, to guarantee yourself a title shot again? Where is his stock? There's so many fights to make for Conor. I think, the talk of Georges St. Pierre going back to 155, you've the Nate Diaz rematch, which people will just buy automatically. I think Conor's value is still very much there for the UFC. We don't know what's going to happen with Khabib. Obviously, that's to be decided. Yeah. So the UFC have a guy who's, growing in their market, becoming a big, big star, and he could be out for the next 2 years. We don't know what's going to happen there. So still, Conor's going to have that stock. There's plenty of fights. Tony Ferguson, who was in the co-main event tonight, there's beef there. There's plenty of stock in Conor's bag at the moment. And obviously, we look at Khabib, being out, and that's a real problem for the UFC. So they've Conor, they've John Jones, and that's pretty much their pay-per-view sellers at the moment. So listen, I don't think it's going to damage Conor because there was no guarantees he was going to fight at this weight class again anyway. Yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, I mean, if there is ever a rematch, it looked last night like Khabib really was McGregor's worst nightmare in all the ways that people talked about. I mean, can you ever see McGregor beating Khabib down the line when ring rust goes away? Maybe he gets a couple of fights under his belt over the next 18 months and they go again. I mean, certainly didn't. I mean, last night it just looked like, how are you going to stop this guy? Yeah, I think he was sloppy though. If you look at the fight back again, there was some very, very uncharacteristic errors from Conor McGregor in that fight. Such as? Sorry? Such as, he threw kicks at Khabib. His striking was on point. His defence was poor. His hands were down low. It was just very, very uncharacteristic from Conor. And, I think there are areas, especially in the first round and the second round, as I said, he was throwing kicks, trying knees. You don't do that at a guy who's a grappler who's going to take you down. It's you're playing right into their hands by doing that. And I think it was just, very, very sloppy performance for me from Conor McGregor. Okay, so McGregor a million miles off his best. I wouldn't say a million miles, but definitely, a large percentage off his best, yeah. And I think it is ring rust. I don't care what anyone says. I thoroughly believe in ring rust as well. Maybe he needs to mesh things back together after the stint of boxing. Maybe it just wasn't. Maybe he should have taken a different fight before coming back and taken on the beast that is Khabib.
There seemed to be ugly scenes outside the venue as well. Did you see any of that? I
didn't see any of that, thankfully, but I did hear reports of scenes. I left a couple of hours, obviously, after the event because of the press conference. Obviously, we saw the tweets and things going around. I heard a lot of shouting from Khabib's fans, while they were leaving the arena, and apparently there was some unsavoury incidents. But I didn't see anything on the way back, but it was obviously a few hours later.
Yeah, it seems to be doing the rounds on social media, those videos. Listen, I know you have a flight to catch, so we'll have plenty to talk about during the week. Wanted to get an initial hit from you. Thanks a million, Niall.
No worries, lads. I'm looking to sleep for a while. So
good man.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Cheers. Lads. We appreciate for staying up very late for us over in Las Vegas.